What's up, people? Welcome to this episode of Buy the Hood podcast or webcast because I don't know how you're consuming this content. So either you're watching the video or listening. My name is Jimmy, as usual. I'm your host, and I'm here with my partner, Corey's in the building. Corey, how are you?
What's going on, Jim? How you feeling?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm excited about this episode, man. This is going to be an amazing episode for us. It's special for a lot of reasons, right? So we have our sister in the building, Ayesha Selden, who is a mogul. I'm just going to use the word mogul. A lot of people know her. She's everyone's favorite auntie on IG. But it's special for us for a lot of reasons, right? So we're all high school classmates. We all went to high school together, right? But outside of that, when you talk about the concept of buy the hood, that's exactly what it is that she did, right? And first and foremost, before we get started, I just want to say, for one, I'm very proud of what you're doing, and I think it's amazing the way that you like give back as well as the work that you do. So I want to start by saying that.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I love when anyone from our school does well, because even like in a weird selfish way, it makes me feel like my diploma is more valuable. So we have people that do amazing things from our school, like doctors, attorneys, entrepreneurs, people in politics, and I love seeing all of it because in a weird way, it makes me feel better about myself. But with that being said, let's just start with this. Let's start from the beginning, right? So you're from South Philly, right? So I know a lot of your story, so I'm not going to like try to just give all your bars away. But if you're born and raised in South Philly, what was your upbringing, right? So how did you get to this point where you recognized that real estate would be your career? And, well, not even your career, because to quote you, you're an investor, but real estate is just one of your vehicles. But did you always look forward to a career in finance or real estate, or how did this come about?
So like you mentioned, actually real estate for me just was another investment that made sense. I invest in a few different things, real estate being just one of them. Real estate is actually probably my favorite investment, but I mean, as a kid, I was always money always just made sense to me. I mean, some people they listen to podcasts all the time. They like had to go to school for for me as a kid growing up. I mean, I mean, like most people from South Philly, very humble beginnings. We were poor, single mom. Similar story to a lot of people who came up in the streets in South Philly, but I could always save a buck. I mean, I was that kid where if you gave me a $10 allowance, I'd have that same $10 6 weeks later. So for me, saving was always something that made sense. As I got older and realized, I think I started working at a bank when I was 18 or 19, and I started seeing real money. People started coming in with like millions. And I remember I worked at the Rittenhouse Square branch, which is now Wells Fargo on Walnut Street. And that's when I really got exposure to like, wait, this $15,000 that I thought was a lot of money saved in my account ain't shit compared to what Miss Rosenstein has, and where her money is. And I started peeping this like, yo, like this lady doesn't work, and she's got these like stocks, and she's got these mutual funds, and she's got money that's working for her. And for me, that's when I started thinking I've got to figure out how to transition from being a saver. For me, that just made sense. I remember when my mom had a house on Webster Street, 12th and Webster, right between Christian and Catherine. I think that area is now called Hawthorne. When I was growing up there, it was called Saigon. And I remember we were moving from Saigon up to Germantown, and my mom owned her house. She paid like $30,000 for this house back in like the 80s. And in the 90s, we were moving out. And I remember telling my mom, I said, Mom, don't sell that house. I said, look, we're within walking distance to downtown, into downtown. We're super close to South Street. I said, don't sell the house, keep it. I think that's going to be a good long-term investment. I mean, she got scared. She didn't listen. She sold that house for $35,000. So as you can imagine today, I mean, it was still a small house, but it was a 3-story house, and we had a huge lot on the side of it that was about the size of our house in square footage. And she sold it.
Wow.
So when that area started to develop, that kind of also kicked me into gear, just realizing what we missed out on, or what my mom missed out on, or what her children missed out on. Because I mean, that house today with no work, just because of the location alone, is worth a ton of money. And in retrospect, I mean, I certainly wish she still had that investment, but I'm kind of glad it happened, because I remember thinking in my 20s, I will never let that happen again.
Yeah.
So
You know what's crazy about that? I did the same when I first got into real estate. So I got into real estate as a teenager, but one of the first moves I did is I had a house on the 1400 block of Colorado Street. And I sold it for like 40. Now, granted, I had got it for next to nothing. So it was like one of those quick flips. It wasn't a wholesale per se. It was like one of those things where I found someone who was selling it, got it for like 15 and sold it for 40. And I thought I was a genius, right? but I, you know, but it's one of those things where you live and you learn. But it's to the point now, I don't even drive down that block no more, because it like every time that hurts. That hurts. So I understand what you mean about that area in South Philly, right? But at the time, it was a different climate too. But that's a learning experience though.
Yeah, totally. I mean, totally different. I mean, it's funny because I firsthand seen, because a lot of parts of the city have been gentrified, but I saw firsthand, because South Philly probably gentrified, I think, more than most parts of Philadelphia. I went to Catholic school on 20th and Christian, so we walked that stretch from 12th and Christian to 20th and Christian every day. And I remember how scary that block was. I mean, that was a scary ass.
Yes,
street.
yes.
I mean, like, you remember like Christian Street around like 16,
I
17,
absolutely
18?
do. I know exactly what you mean.
It was scary as shit.
And now it's $1 million homes.
Now, I mean, it's like, so to see that as a young professional who, you know, I started investing and dabbling in stocks, and then I became a licensed stockbroker. And just seeing the change of how South Philly could go from being as scary as it was to, like you said, $1 million beautiful homes. I remember thinking, oh, that's the move. So at the time when I started heavily investing in real estate, which is back in 2011, I kind of I saw the market crash, and I said, all right, let me just see what I can do in the real estate market. And people at the time were saying, don't go south of Washington Avenue. And I said, you know what, at some point, Christian Street looked scary as shit. So everybody's saying, don't go south of Washington. I said, you know what? I'm going to bet south of Washington, because one, it's still affordable, and it doesn't even look as scary as Christian Street did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So that to me was a logical move, and it paid off.
Yeah, because at one point it was like Lombard to Washington and from Broad to the river. So there's that little box, and everything was exploding. And they actually changed the name of it. It wasn't South Philly anymore. It was Graduate Hospital. You know, so they changed. You know how they changed it? Because, like, you know, that's the first thing that happens. They come up with a new name. So it was Graduate Hospital area. And that stuff that took off. I remember that time. Don't go past Washington. That was a thing. But like you said, only one way it can go, because the proximity to Center City is still what it is.
Still what it is.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
And I ended up starting investing not far from where you were on the 1400 block of Colorado. I started investing on the 1300 block of South Mole.
Okay.
So found a property. In fact, I actually, I found a good realtor, Sharon. My first bid around there was on the 1200 block of South 15th. It was a 3-story house. And I remember being pissed because it was a HUD property, and I lost it by like $2,000. It went for like 72 grand, a 3-story on the 1200 block of South 15th.
Wow.
So I just kept looking in that area, found one on the 1300 block of South Mold, and then bought another house on that block, and then bought on the 1400 block of South Chadwick. So I like that area because I like to be close to Broad. I mean, in retrospect, because I was kind of insistent on staying close to Broad, in retrospect, it didn't matter. Because if you're on 15th or 22nd in Wharton, it doesn't really matter. But in my logic, I wanted to be closer to Broad because it was closer to the subway. But it didn't even matter in the long run.
So you grew up with the idea of studying money. Money has always been a thing. So when you went to school, you majored in what? Economics? What was your degree in?
Yep. So I had a dual degree in economics and marketing with a minor in communications. I knew I wanted to do something in business. Had no idea what I wanted to do. So I initially started out in marketing, mostly because of Boomerang.
That is absolutely hilarious. Because Yo, shout out to my
Listen,
brother
that was
Dev.
my shit.
Dev did the same thing. He actually has 2 marketing degrees, and he will tell you to this day, he was trying to be like Marcus Graham. So that's hilarious.
Listen. You
Yo,
know, I mean, as kids growing up, when we did, I mean, that was like one of the first movies where like black people was getting it. You know,
Yes, they
nobody was
were. No, I
selling
agree.
drugs.
getting the
Listen,
check.
they was living the good life, pet houses. I said, oh, okay, I can get with this.
Yeah.
So I started out with a marketing degree and realized I was more so interested in the financial end of it. So I was debating, do I pick up accounting? Do I pick up finance? Or do I pick up economics? I wanted to get through college as quickly as possible. So ended up picking up economics in addition to marketing. And then I realized I was going too quickly through and I wanted to get my full 4-year experience. So I picked up a minor in communications.
Okay. I'm gonna get back to the school things. I know you have some thoughts on that, but I have another question. Did you ever? I have this thing in my I call it a matrix moment. Now that's what I call it. All right.
Yeah.
So you study money. Did you ever have that moment where everything clicked and you recognize how corporations, the ownership of corporations and the ownership of like buildings and land, how everything works together and kind of like runs the world? Like, did you ever have that matrix moment where you say, "Oh my God, like this is what's really going on around me"?
Let me tell you something. Sitting in a class studying for my Series 7, that's when that clicked for me. So I graduated in May of 2000. I started studying for my Series 7 exam a month or so after that. And I remember sitting in my Series 7 class thinking, this is what this shit is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Right here. Like this, everything I'm learning right here is what this is all about. That was my matrix moment.
Yeah. I always ask people about that because anyone who like studies any sort of market, they always have this moment where it's like, oh my God, it's like you start to see the world different. Everything slows down, right? Now,
Yep.
Corey, you can relate to that, right? Where you start,
Man,
you start going into the market, you looking at products like who owns this and how long have they had? Like, you look at everything different.
yeah, like when I first started owning companies, and then I saw that with the companies that those companies started that they owned, I was like, man, it's so much crazy money out here. Like, why would I do anything else besides own anything?
Exactly. You know, it's funny because and I don't talk about this much on social media, largely because as a licensed stockbroker and my firm is a little they're pretty stringent on what I can say and what I can't say. And Jimmy, I've even seen some of your disclosures where this is not.
Yeah,
advice.
you got to be careful. And I don't even. And the crazy part is, I used to have a securities license. I had the 63, the 6 to 26. I had all of them, right? But I had mine before the crash, right? So. And I don't know, but I know what happened was they started changing the rules, and I had to start submitting like bank statements on a monthly basis. They were like, "This is like when everything went crazy." And at the point, I really wasn't using it because I was more into the real estate, so I just held my real estate license and kind of like just let them go. But I still at times find myself like trying to disclose, even my real estate license. This is not invest. Do not come back at me. So I understand why, with you still being active, you kind of like, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I very rarely will I even mention it, but it's funny because when you start thinking about things, and I reinvest all of my dividends. I own stocks. I reinvest everything. But when you really start to sit and think, I was looking at some shares of a stock that I won't even mention the name of just because I don't want it to be construed as advice. And I realized that this particular telecommunications stock that I hold, the dividend that I get from it pays my cell phone bill every month.
That's
cell phone bills ain't cheap. So
that's right.
I was like, this particular telecom stock pays my cell phone bill every month. Or when people ask me like, why do you get an iPhone every year? Because I don't have to pay for it. I have because I have dividends in a fruit company that could buy me multiple iPhones every single year.
Why not?
Like, so the interesting thing is, in retrospect, so 22-year-old me to probably 30-something-year-old me was very, very frugal because I was more so interested in the ownership that Corey just talked about. I was more so interested in, forget the nice car, forget all the bling, forget all that stuff. Let me just bank and save as much as I possibly can so that on the other side of this, I don't even have to work to pay myself. But like what I bought many, many years ago will pay my bills for me. Or, if I want a new pair of Nikes or whatever, my dividends will pay for that stuff. And that's a whole different place. That's a whole different place to be.
Absolutely it is. And I find myself getting caught in traps at times. So you go on the web, they have these things where you can go back and calculate if I would have bought this at this period and reinvested. I get caught in those traps and just get mad. I call my mom like, Mom, what's wrong with you?
Listen, I got a good one for you. In 2000, I think it was 2001, I had $2,000. And I'll never forget sitting there deciding, do I buy Apple or do I buy Dell? So $2,000 was back in, it was either 2000 or 2001. Do I buy Apple or do I buy Dell with this $2,000? I fucking bought Dell.
I thought this was going somewhere else. But you know what though? I ain't gonna front though. At the time, Dell was cooking. Michael Dell was cooking at one point.
At the time, you would have bought Dell.
Yeah.
You know, I remember. You have no idea how many times I've gone back to that $2,000 that I could have put in either one of them, and here we are.
Live and learn.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, here's what I tell people. Even with that being said, you still were learning from that experience, for one. And for two, you still were making the right plays. You were investing. And that's the key. Because to me, what I see is most people's problem is not taking action.
Yep.
People don't take action. I talk to people. I mean, I know you do too. I see you out there trying to teach and everything. And I talk to people every day. And there's some people that will literally inbox me every day. What you think about this? What you think about that? I said, what have you done thus far? Nothing. I'm asking you what you think about. You've been asking me what do I think about specific things, whether it be a piece of land or a property, whatever it may be. That's all you do is ask me, what do I think about it? Well, what do you think about it? Are you going to make a move or not? So action to me, like take action to me. That's like, where most people's problem is the action. Yeah. So that's crazy.
That's one of the reasons I get so upset sometimes is because you don't have to want to be a landlord. Not everybody's meant to be a landlord. Not everybody's meant to own every specific kind of investment that I hold. I get that. But you need to own something. And the reality is there are investments that you can hold as a lazy ass investor.
Absolutely.
You can hold mutual funds, you can hold index funds, you can hold ETF. There's so much stuff that you can hold where you don't have to worry about getting texts from tenants or calls from tenants or getting headaches, but you got to own something. Yeah.
And all right, let me get back to that. But let me ask you a question about the whole school thing. I know you have some thoughts about where we stand with the student loan debt crisis and all those kind of things. And you've been making some statements and I saw people going crazy. You kind of rile people up when you talked about that. So my question is,
people get mad when you try to take their education away.
I tell people all the time, don't let school get in the way of your education. But
right.
My question to you is, so what are your thoughts at this moment, right? If you had a child that was getting ready to get to that point, what would your advice be?
I saw a post today on someone's page. She said something like, don't send your kid off to college at 18 without a plan. You send a kid off at 18. They have no plan. They have no idea what they want to do in life. And to be honest, an 18-year-old today is not the same 18-year-olds that we were 20 years ago or 20-some years ago, right? They have no clue what they're doing. They have no clue what they want to be in life. They have no clue how to even barely tie their shoes. And then you're sending them into an institution where they're racking up $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year in debt. That makes zero sense, right? Mm-hmm. So if I had a kid today, they're 18, I'm not sending them to rack up a whole bunch of debt without a plan in place. So what I would probably do in the interim at 18, I'm either sending them to some sort of community college where they're doing some sort of trade through something to try to figure out what do I want to do in life. Maybe they're working for me, maybe they're working for some other business owner. They're doing something, unless they're dead set and know beyond the shadow of a doubt, here's exactly what I want to do in life. But not many 18-year-olds know that today.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out who you are, what is your work ethic, what is your long-term plan? Do you want to start a business? Is college even needed? Because I think we're still holding and hanging on to this college is our only way out idea. Because when we were coming up 20 years ago or 30 years ago, that's all we were told. And at the time it probably was true. Today it's a different story. I mean, think about the shortage right now that we have of contractors in the city of Philadelphia.
Oh my God, especially good ones.
Listen, especially good ones. If your son or your daughter wants to be a tradesman instead, they can make a fortune far more than they probably could than they could having a bachelor's degree in English or something. I mean, like there's a ton of opportunity out here that doesn't necessarily involve college. And I think that at least, if nothing else, because I'm not saying that college is not for everyone. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there are other ways.
Yeah. And I think the key is what you said, having a plan. Because one of the things I look back at is, first of all, I had like good grades all throughout school or whatever. But my worst grades out of any year was probably my freshman year, because I was not prepared to be away with no one watching over me. I was wilding my freshman year. But with that being said, I also know that there are all kinds of grants and different things that I had no plan. I just knew that, okay, I'm graduating here and now I'm going to college. I had no plan, though, like you said. So I think that's a good point, to have a plan, because if you have a plan, then you know which way to go. So I am a proponent of community college as well, but also having a plan and thinking about how to get it paid for. I know people, I was just talking to someone who took like a job at Temple just so their kid can go to Temple for free, right? And
I know a lot of parents that do that.
Yeah, be strategic. They're strategic in how they do it. That's what I'm saying. Be strategic in how you make that move. All right, so getting back to you building your portfolio up, and you mentioned about a lot of people, when they talk about the buy and hold aspect of real estate, they don't want to be a landlord. So a lot of times we have guests on here, and I ask questions for my own benefit just because I like to learn as well. So you manage all your own stuff, right?
Yep. Unfortunately.
Okay. I got one specific question. This is going to sound crazy, Corey, but I always wonder this. I ask a lot of buy and hold landlords who have a lot of property. So in between my personal portfolio, stuff that I have for clients, stuff that I might be flipping at the time, I might have like 50 to 60 properties at one time, right?
Yeah.
How do you control your keys? That sounds that's a crazy. I always wonder this, because I go crazy like trying to keep control of keys. How do you control your keys?
So I have a little it's not a briefcase, but it's like a little bag, and every single one of my keys is tagged by property address. So I have like you can pick them up at Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. It's like a little color coded little tags. I write the address on there, and then I clip them on. So I basically, that bag of keys is like near and dear to my heart. It's probably one of my favorite things. It's a heavy ass. You have somebody
carry it around like they're carrying the codes.
And that is my favorite. It's cheap. Listen, like I'm gonna put a combination lock on it, like that thing is everything.
All right, so I got something similar, but I'll be drawing, right? So what I'll do is like on one of them, I'll like write the number 1, and then I'll have like in my phone or a note somewhere, number 1 is this address, because I always worry about like if someone steals it or breaks it, like they have the actual address, like that freaks me out.
You're so right. I don't put the full address on there, so I'll put like for example, we had multiple houses on the 2900 block of Bailey, so I'll put like just the last 2 numbers Bailey, or I'll put like just South Chadwick, or I'll put South North Patton. So I won't put the full address on there, so if somebody found the keys, they could.
Y'all portfolio is large. My portfolio fit on a key ring that I just in a drawer, like.
And I just wanted to also tell you real quick, I appreciate your work on the 2900 block of Taylor Street, because my wife and I got a couple on that block. And I see what you're doing. You
raised your value up real nice.
Listen, Isha's making that block beautiful. But
you see my spot over there?
Yeah, I see it. I see what goes down. But so that I know that's like a crazy question. I always wondered that question. That's a question that's like, but I know that if I'm asking that question, a lot of people have the same questions about that. But that's like mad specific.
Yep.
Because the other one I have is, all right, so in managing a lot of properties, is bank accounts, right? So I set up, I'm gonna tell how I do my own personal one. So I set up, when I'm holding a deposit, those are all in separate accounts. But I go back and forth between when I'm building up sort of like my slush fund for repairs. Do I put it all in one account, or do I set up an individual one for each property? Or you just have one major fund? That's another question. Do you have one major fund that you put in for repairs and expenses and things like that?
So depending on the ownership. So I have 3 different partnerships. So with my partnership with a guy named Andy, he and I have a separate account that manages just one property. I have a triplex on 63rd Street with a guy I work with and his wife. We have just one LLC account. And that takes care of all the expenses of that building. And then my partner that I have most of my properties with, we have an S corp that basically does all the property management for all of our individual LLCs. So everything just kind of gets filtered into that one account, and then the LLC, that the S corp, which does our property management, basically handles all the expenses of all the various LLCs. And then for properties that I have on my own, have their own separate account.
Yeah, so you got.
So I mean, it's.
Yeah. So okay. So you kind of have that. That's what I was wondering, because that gets kind of crazy when you have like, you know.
But that was bars though, because with the S corp handling all of the property management stuff, now you don't have to look at everything individually. The S corp will do it all for you. So that's
yeah. That actually is a gem. That's like a umbrella. And by the way, your partner, she's amazing. She's like one of my idols because she's so low key, and she be out here killing it. She be out here killing it.
She wanted them low key. But you know what? The crazy thing is, I'm finding there's a lot of people in Philly who are just like low key killing it.
Listen, man.
You never know. They may not even be on social media.
They're
just out here just killing it.
I learned my lesson a long time ago. When I first got into real estate, the first job I had was a real estate salesperson, right? So I worked for an old lady named Virginia Mesa, and I'm pretty sure everybody in Philly seen her sign Mesa Realty, like the yellow and red signs, right? So she's an older lady.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So she's so smart. She taught me so much. So one of the things she taught me, because I would sit in the office and people would come in and they would have a Mercedes and a 3-piece suit, and me being a young boy, I run to go help him like, oh, he got money. And she would let me do it and be laughing. And then because I literally spent time showing this guy, I was so green. I didn't even see if he was pre-approved, but he had a Mercedes and a suit. I took this guy to see like 60 properties. We get back to like run his credit and everything. He had the worst credit. He had no money. He just wasted like 3 weeks of my time, right?
Yep.
But then I would find guys that come in with like, you know, dirty jeans and a pickup truck with a big dent in it. They wouldn't even like think to get rid fixed. And guys would have like $600,000 in their account. Like, so that was a lesson I got early on in real estate. One of the lessons I got is you can't judge a book by its cover. And that's specifically when you talk about like ownership in real estate. It's amazing, that lesson right there. Because a lot of people into the flash.
That's that millionaire next door stuff. Millionaire next door stuff. I mean, I'll never forget reading that book early on as a new broker. Because that opened my eyes to, I'll never forget, if I went out into the lobby to greet a new client for the first time, I always thought that as soon as I go out, the flashier the person is, the less money they have. You know, I'll never forget going out and greeting one. It was a husband and a wife, older couple, and they had on this like vintage old ass suit, like you knew that they've been wearing this thing since the 1970s. As soon as I was like, yes, I saw that old ass suit. I said, I know they got something. Sure enough,
got cake.
You totally flipped it. So now you look at it different. You're like, okay.
Listen, I know what's about. Listen, as soon as I see somebody who they look like they were clean, but like nothing flashy, nothing new. You could tell that it was like they had kept them suits, you know, since the 70s. Like they were
dry cleaned every day down the street from the.
But you know what? That goes to that matrix moment when you start to look at every dollar out as future income loss. You start to spend a little bit differently. I know when I had that moment, you start looking at how a dividend works or how rent works. And you say every dollar that I put out was future income. Like you literally are putting your money to work for you. So you start to treat money a little different. You have a different relationship with money than other people. So let me ask you a question about someone who's listening to this or watching this and they want to get started. They're at home. They have never started. And they say, look, I want to be like Each. I want to get some real estate. I want to get some investments. What would you say is the very first thing they should do?
The first thing I think that people need to do is condition themselves as a saver first, period. You know, there are steps to this game. You know, you can't go from one end of the process all the way to disciplined investor and think that everything's going to be gravy. There's a process, and there's a process for a reason. Now, I always say that someone who has mastered the art of being a saver first, how you gonna be a landlord and you ain't got no money saved? You know, like you don't even know how to save a reserve, because when something goes wrong, when the hot water tank explodes or the roof goes, the tenant stops paying that person, and you couldn't figure out how to even save some reserve money, you're gonna lose your house. You're gonna destroy your credit. So I say follow the steps of the process, figure out how to be a saver first, and then figure out how to be an investor, and then figure out how to be a disciplined investor, and make sure that you follow and embrace every single step of that process first.
Yeah.
So I heard saver, investor, disciplined investor. What's the difference between an investor and a disciplined investor?
I think I bumped my head around a lot, just figuring out what works. I mean, I think the investor is someone who realizes the benefit of having their money work for them, but they haven't yet figured out, like, okay, I'm not going to chase returns. I'm not going to chase what looks sexy. I remember back in the day buying stocks where the company wasn't even making money, but it was like the hot stock. Think of everybody who like dove off the cliff on tech stocks back in the late 90s. I won't bring up Bitcoin because I mean I see the value in that kind of currency, but an investor is someone before they find the discipline of investing. I think they're just chasing returns regardless of whether or not it actually makes sense as an investment. Point of arrival is figuring out how you can apply disciplines to your investing. What is your philosophy? You're not just out chasing returns. You're not out just trying to find some sexy investment. You've actually got an applied discipline to what you're buying, why you're buying, when you're selling. I mean, it's actually a lot more strategic. So I think it's hard to go from that saver to just jumping straight into being a disciplined investor, because you got to learn some lessons, and that's okay, because I think that's just part of the process. I mean, I've gotten burned on satellite radio stocks and technology mutual funds back in the day. I've gotten burned on all those, and today when I look at an investment, I've got all those lessons that I can remember on. Yeah, I lost money on this. I bought companies that weren't making money. Like, now I'm like, okay, now I know why I applied the disciplines to my investment approach.
Yeah. So it's also managing emotion too, right?
Yeah.
Because I think
talking to an investor that was talking about managing emotions in her investment. She does short-term trading, and she was talking about how she manages her emotions during her trading. She's an options trader, and she was talking about managing emotions during her trades.
even with long-term investments, I like the emotional part. I've seen that ruin people too. Like you just talked about not having reserves and not being a saver. I've seen that ruin people. Not managing emotions. I've seen that ruin. I've seen people hold on to things they shouldn't have because they feel attached to it. But that whole thing about not having reserves, I think that's a gem in itself, because I've seen people literally get to a point where something's going wrong with their property and they don't have any reserves, and they start ducking their tenant the way a tenant would duck them if they didn't pay their rent. They start ducking their tenant.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one thing I can personally say is I have never taken like cash to live from any investment, right? So I still work jobs and things like that to get income, so all my investments can like do their work for them. And I bring that up because I know you still work, even though you have a portfolio, if you wanted to, that could take care of you.
Yep. I still got a gig. I mean, I'm down here in Durham, North Carolina right now working. I saw clients all day today.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something really important, and it's probably one of my favorite studies in economics is behavioral finance, which is exactly what you mentioned, just the emotional side of investing, why we do what we do. And the funny thing is, I've found that most people respond to their investments very similar to how they would at a blackjack table or sitting at, we respond to fear and greed. If I were to ask the average investor who's buying any investment, stock, real estate, how do you make money investing? It's you buy low and you sell high, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a whole lot that goes on in the interim. If you're getting paid dividends or getting paid rent, there's a whole lot that goes on in the middle. But when it actually gets right down to it, I had a conversation with a client the other day, and I said, we've got a stock that's up like 28% year to date. And we got one stock that's marginally up. It was like flat for the year. I said, I want to sell the stock that's up 28% for the year and reallocate it to something else. And they said, well, why would you want to sell my investment that's doing well? And I said, okay, here's where your emotions are now playing a role in what you want to sell and what you want to keep. Before we got into the investment, I asked you, how do you make money in an investment? You buy it when it's low, you sell it when it's high. But because we respond to our emotions based on fear and greed, you're actually doing the exact opposite of what you should do. So you want to keep something that's done well, and you want to sell something that hasn't done well. That's the exact opposite of the logic that we said we were going to apply. Because
where you start.
it's totally counterintuitive to how you, because our emotions get involved.
Yeah, and that's so for those out there listening or watching, always keep that in mind, regardless of what we're talking about, is those emotions. Because I even when you talked about, you brought up crypto, right? So my foray into crypto, I had got some crypto early, but it started going up, right? So it went up so much that I literally got scared, and because I'm not used to seeing anything, right? So I sold all of it. Only thing I have left at this point is stuff that people had gave me, but I sold all of it and bought a property. I went to what I know, right? But at the time I sold it, it was around like, yeah, it was like 13, I think, at the time I sold. And so then after that, I saw it go all the way up to 20. And of course, you get into your feelings again, like, damn, I sold it. But I bought it next to nothing.
Sell my crypto, Jim.
Yeah. So instead of me saying, well, damn, I went and did this, the emotions get involved. And you say, well, I went to 20. But I saw a lot of people with their emotions going both ways with that whole ride in 2018. So, and I just say that to say, like, always keep that in mind when you're making decisions, is how to control your emotions. But moving forward, though, one of the things that impresses me about you, outside of what you've built, is how you give back. You give back in terms of, like, you go out and you speak. I even heard a young lady in Philly, Jamisa, said that you mentored her. You actually told her, look, just buy you some Starbucks, and you gave her all the game, and now she's flying doing her own thing. So was that something that you always wanted to do, or that's something that you like stepped into in terms of being a mentor?
You know what? I think that in realizing in the communities that we come from, a couple things I knew to be true. One, help is not on the way. And
Man,
two,
listen.
as a friend of mine says all the time, we all we got. So if the people who are doing it, and people say to me all the time, like, you have people trash talking on your IG page. I don't know why you do that. That's why I don't say a word. That's why I don't say shit. I keep all my stuff to myself. It's our responsibility. Like, I mean, I don't even feel like I'm doing anything admirable. What it's my responsibility to do. Like, I could just keep doing my thing. That's irresponsible. We got people in our community who are hungry, don't have the education, don't have the knowledge. Like, how can we not teach somebody else how to do it?
Absolutely. And we're believers in that too. We go all around teaching it, because the thing I realize is it's twofold, right? So a lot of times I talk to people and they say, why do you share so much information? You're going to create competition, right? And I never look at it that way, because first of all, I think in abundance is one. I always think in abundance. But then two, absolutely. And I hate to say this, but it's my experience over the last couple of decades. 99% of the people I talk to aren't going to do anything anyway, right? But I'm trying to find that 1% that will, because that 1%, like you said, Superman's not coming to save us. No one's coming to save us. We have to, like, look out for our own. But I think it's admirable in the way you do that. And also, and you know what? I want to give a shout out to your girls as well, because the way they rep you is crazy, and I think that's dope. Like with Nairobi, and shout out to our sister Kenya. Like the way they rep you, is kind of dope as well. And they
that
definitely,
sisterhood is crazy.
Yeah, because, like, it's one thing to have a friend that's doing well, and you say you support, but the way they show you support, I think, is dope. So I always comment when I see y'all show each other love. I think that's dope. And she just actually made a major move too. So
major.
I'm gonna reach out to her. I want because I want to get someone who so we can follow her journey as well, because that's dope. So what are your plans for the future? I see that you started in the single family game, and now you've kind of transitioned and you're buying more multifamily properties. But now you told me that you're cleaning up, like, past inventory. But I see that you're looking towards that multifamily. Did you ever think that you would do that, or did you always think that you'd be in a single family lane, or is that always a plan?
You know what? There was always so much competition in multifamily. I like cheap properties, and multifamilies were always so overpriced. And I think there's a variety of benefits to the single family. I mean, you've got they're more liquid. You've got people who tend to stay longer. There are a variety of advantages, and it's interesting to me now being a multi-family owner landlord. Because I get complaints about shit that I never heard of before. Like one tenant said to me something like, well, the girl upstairs left her trash. And I'm like, what are you calling me about? Like, y'all bickering amongst, like, I don't even understand what you're saying. Like, tell her. Like, I don't even know what you're talking to me about right now. Or somebody, one called me, like, somebody, too many of her friends on the porch. Like, I'm like, I don't, like, so these are things that I've never dealt with being a single family landlord. And there are obviously advantages to multifamily. So my last probably 5 buildings have all been multifamily that I bought back in 18. I haven't bought anything in 2019 just because we went on like a buying frenzy over the last few years because things were just so cheap and I knew they wouldn't stay that cheap forever. So we were more so interested in just bulking up, and now we're trying to figure out how to, get them all rehabbed and then occupied. Next step, so it's probably going to be commercial. In fact, we did submit 2 offers this year on 2 commercial mixed-use buildings on Ogons Avenue. As it turned out, it was a divorce proceeding, and the guy ended up not selling them. But that's probably the next step. If I can get some either solely commercial or commercial mixed-use buildings, that's probably my next move. If not, I may keep looking in Philly. I may look outside of Philly. I mean, I'm hearing some really good numbers out of like Memphis and Baltimore that I'm really curious about. My biggest goal is just to have my money returned to me as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So today, I'll do that. I'll do that wherever it makes the most sense.
Okay, that makes sense. You brought up a couple things right there I want to expound upon. So, like the difference between multifamily and single family is different. So, I always like to talk about the mistakes I made because I made pretty much every mistake there is to make as a landlord. I tell people all the time that's how I learn. One of the things I did, I had a bunch of properties out of town before, and I bought a commercial building, right? And I actually had Wells Fargo as a tenant. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know at the time. At the time, all the experience I had was a single family properties. You start talking about like a triple net lease, certain calls, and I actually sold the property for a profit. This is again, like I don't really sell too much now, but back in the day, this is before the bubble burst, by the way. One of the mistakes that I personally made back then was I was buying everything that I could buy. Because first of all, the money was cheap. I was, to be completely transparent, you could get a loan back then without even showing income. It was completely the wild west. So one of the mistakes I made was just buying whatever I could make. Now I got lucky. I got pretty much unscathed because I went so hard. I kind of like started to fall back and sell things off. And the reason I was selling things off wasn't because I saw what was happening. I was completely clueless. It's just that I was trying to scale down because I was running myself crazy, right? And I say all that to say this in terms of you with your goals, because I've had 60 properties at a time and made less money than at times when I've had 10 properties bought the right way. So I always had this thing about doors, right? In my head, I always I want to have a certain number of doors, but I'm always rethinking. I have like every day I have a fight with someone on this shoulder, someone on this shoulder. Like, is it about getting doors or is it about a certain cash flow? So when you talk about your long-term goals, what do you think? Do you think about a certain number of doors or is it about the cash flow from the doors? Because those are 2 different things.
2 totally different things. So for me, in my mind, a door is always the equivalent of about $1,000 a month in cash flow. Because you also got to think, for me, my rent roll is pretty substantial at this point. And so I have 44 units, which is 31 buildings. And I only have 5 mortgages. Nice. So most of my properties are free and clear. So I'm not a big, and I've talked about this on my page, I'm not a very big leverage person. So for me, I do think about doors simply because I don't think doors with debt. I think about free and clear doors.
Okay.
So I'm in my mind, I've always, that always just kind of, it always like blows my mind when I talk to people who, I've got 150 units or 150 doors and they have like 150 mortgages. I'm like, that's like the scary shit I've ever heard. That's like like what are you doing with all that cash? how do you have that many loans? Like, you talk about you've been flipping property, like you flip some, you got all that. Like, how do you have that many mortgages? Like, what are you doing?
It'd be hard to sleep at night with that many.
Yeah, like he got that. Who let you get that many mortgages?
But see, and that's something I had to learn though. That's something I had to learn too, because I used to be that way. I used to be like, grow, and I'll figure it out. But then what I figured out is, and a lot of it, to be honest with me, it hit me when I read the Warren Buffett book, The Snowball Effect, right? And how I
book.
Yeah, it's a huge book. But I took a lot from that. For one, his patience. I took that from that about being patient.
Yeah.
And also, instead of just buying to be buy with a purpose, but buy it right. So even if you look at how he manages his company, they have so much money in cash. And the reason they keep so much in cash is because right now he doesn't see anything that's worth buying. So I start trying to apply that myself. Okay, so now instead of just buying real estate because I can get approved for the loan and all that, what if I just save this cash up and wait till I find, because I love cheap houses too, right? So I kind of took that from there, like buying the properties right as opposed to just buying because you can buy. And I know that a lot of new investors, like once they told they can get approved for a mortgage, they're leveraging everything. That's cool in the market that we're in. It's cool in the market we're in now. But I'm old enough to have been through several different markets.
Yep. And I mean, I think that that's the key. And I think I posted something on my page recently, or one of my stories, or something that, or maybe it was, I don't know, somewhere I said, people just have to be careful of the advice that they're taking. So if someone hasn't been through a recession before, it's really, really easy to make money in the longest economic expansion in U.S. history. Like, how could you not be making money right now? Where the rubber meets the road is what happens when the economy contracts. What happens when we hit a recession?
You sound like Mike Tyson. Like everybody got a plan until they get hit in the mouth.
Listen,
everybody got a plan until you get hit in the mouth.
This is absolutely true. So
yes,
I think that that's amazing advice right there, right? Because everybody thinks they're like, and I've been there. Like I said, I'm old enough to know I've been there. When you listen before the market crashed, like I had so many deals come across in front of me, and that's one of the reasons I held onto my license. I would sell properties before even putting them on the market. I just pick up a phone. Hey, I got a new property for sale. People would buy it, and the numbers are going high and high. My commission checks were through the roof, and I thought I was smart. And then you realize, like, you weren't smart at all. The market was just booming so much. I don't know if we'll ever see that again, because it was completely nuts. And I know people like, you're exact. But if you lived through that, it was out of control. It was out of control. I literally knew women who were strippers who had like 4 and 5 rental properties where they were getting 100% loans. Like this is real. This is what's going on.
The glory days.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that bad. And who knows, like to your point, I don't know if it'll ever get that bad again. But I think that now people are going to create whole new fresh ideas on how to screw up the economy. So I'm playing it safe. I'm playing it based on, what I know works. And just keeping my fingers crossed. I'm trying to just make sure I'm not over leveraged. So if this thing takes a big step back, I'm still good.
All right. So one more thing that I got to ask you, right? Because I see like sometimes on your page, right? And you mentioned it a little bit yourself, all the hard work and everything. So we know where you come from. We're from Philly. We know what it's like being in South Philly, because South Philly, listen, she said Saigon, that's real.
That's real.
So we know that you've put in blood, sweat, and tears to get what you got. You've maintained your integrity and built the business. Like I said, well, you're building multiple businesses, literally. How do you feel when you see people come on your page and say that, hey, you got lucky, or you got a windfall, or someone left you money? Because I see the smart comments people make.
I just posted this. This is, I think, my last post on my page. When I first saw that, I legitimately thought the guy was joking. Like the thread maybe like way back, the original thread maybe way back. I literally thought the guy was legitimately joking, because I couldn't quite fathom, just knowing my upbringing, knowing like everything that I did, as hard as I worked as a new broker, to really build my business and my cash flow and then ultimately my franchise. I thought it was legitimately a joke. And then when I found out it wasn't, I got like angry. So I went through like a series of like from disbelief to anger to, at this point now I'm just sitting back and thinking like I must have really made it for somebody to see something. So I mean,
that's a great way to look at it.
It is what it is. I mean, I think that I think that like, yeah. Now it's just it's incredulous to me. I mean, it's also very sad for someone to feel like in order for you to be where you are, you must have gotten some sort of like windfall or some sort of handout. It's actually really sad when you think about it. But I mean, you know, I'll live.
Yeah. Hard work though. You put the
I like that. I'll live. Like whatever.
I'll live. Yeah. That's a new hashtag from hashtag I'll live. So Ish, listen, thank you so much for your time. Right. In terms of your business, right, your investment portfolio, you told us that you want to move to commercial. Is that something that you're going to do like fairly soon? Are you waiting until you get all these other stuff off your books, or like, are we going to see a hotel one day, or like, are you really playing Monopoly out here? What's going on?
If the right deal comes across my desk, I'll jump in. But I'm trying to like keep my focus on. I've got 13 units left to get up and running. 2 of which are almost already done. And then the last 11 are just, I think that's like 3 or 4 buildings that are multifamilies. So if I can just get these buildings done, I'll see what's out there.
And I'm only going to ask these questions. I know people who are listening or watching are going to ask, like, okay, so 44 units, you have 13 to get off, and some of them are multifamily. At what point, how long will you be able to still manage your own properties?
So what I've said is once I'm done rehabbing and renting these last 13, I may just convince my partner to we can hire someone who works for us full time who does all of our own management. I mean, it would be worth it to pay that person a base salary of $40K, maybe like get them a $300 a month car lease, pay a cell phone bill, just to have them like literally manage all of our stuff. Because that number that I gave you, that's either mine or ours. That doesn't even include what's also my real estate partners. So between the two of us, I mean, we've got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So if we paid someone to do all of our management, I mean, that would still, that would save us a ton of time and give us more flexibility to just continue working on the business instead of in the business.
Nice. So for all those people out there,
last bar, it was crazy.
Yeah. That's right. Working on
the business instead of in the business.
Yeah, that's definitely a gem right there. And for those listening, he said y'all can inbox her y'all resumes. Oh man, so like last thing, I keep saying last thing, but like, I love talking to you about this stuff. But books, I know you said you're not heavy into a lot of like investment books or whatever, but I know, and I probably said your book, if I ask you to give me one book, you're probably going to say the book I already mentioned, right?
My favorite business book of all time is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I did read Snowball. I mean, I'll pick up anything by Warren Buffett, but Snowball was an amazing book, but I think that's a big commitment for a lot of people. That was a lot to read, but 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, The Millionaire Next Door, Who Moved My Cheese are probably my favorite business books.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one because that's like short and to the point, and it gives you the information.
All of those books with Snowball are easy reads.
Snowball is Diesel, but the good thing about Snowball is it's like a lot of biography in there too. So it's gems within the story of the life, but it's a lot of gems in there that you can apply to different investment vehicles. You don't have to necessarily be doing what he's doing. But Ish, man, listen, thank you. We've been trying to do this for a minute, but I want to thank you for your time as usual. For the people out there, how can they follow what you're doing? What's the best place? And I know the answer, but I'll let you say it as well. It's IG, right?
Sorry, you were cutting off. Say that again, Jimmy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said for the people out there who want to follow your journey and what you're doing, what's the best place for them to like see what you're doing? IG, right?
Yeah, definitely IG. I'm on IG as at Ayesha Selden, AYESHASELDEN all together. That's the best
Okay.
place to reach me.
Yeah, and I'll put the link in the description on everything that we do. Make sure you follow her because she's also hilarious. But it's a lot of gems and a lot of information there. Before we get out of here, Corey, any last questions? Anything you want to say, Deesh?
Appreciate your time and all the gems you dropped on us. I do have one question about your non-real estate investment vehicles. When you chose those non-real estate investment vehicles, what was the driving force behind those? Like, what's the future of those investment vehicles for you?
It's only so much she can say about that, man. You know, she got to watch what she say.
I mean, like, what did she want it to do for her? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not telling her to give us what she has in her portfolio, but tell us what you want it to do for you. Like, how is it going to affect those real estate dealings that you do?
Yeah, so I mean, I like things that kick off good income. I mean, I like good company. So I mean, I can say without disclosing too much, I own a franchise, and I own individual stocks. In my stock portfolio, for example, I just look for good companies. Not every one of my stocks pay a dividend, but for the most part, I like things that are gonna pay me regardless of whether or not the stock market's going up or down.
Okay, so I heard you say you like good companies. I need you to define good company for
me. Good cash flow, pay a stable dividend, good leadership, not too much debt. You know, I look at companies very similar to how I look at an individual.
Yep.
So if I've got an individual,
I just told you.
No, we say that every time when we go talk. That's one of our actual talking points, which is funny. You say that. I always tell people, like, if your Uncle Harry never pays anybody back, like, why would you put your money with Uncle Harry when his debt is through the roof, right? Doesn't pay anybody back. So that's a great point. That's a great way to look at a company too.
And with that, I appreciate your time. I just wanted to, talk about those non-real estate investment vehicles because you're doing the most. And for the people that's watching this, they should know exactly how dope you are. Like, so we gotta get that out there. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. Because like when we talk about buy the hood, that's exactly what you do because there's value outside of what you do for yourself personally in terms of income. You're improving a lot of neighborhoods, right? So I'm witness to, like I said, you own property on a block that I own property on. I'm like, eesh, then buying this, like she's making this block look good. This is what's up. So, when you talk about buy the hood, and that's what you do. So, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Keep making us all look good. Keep making our diplomas look good. Right. You know what I'm saying?
HH's diplomas is looking better and better.
Absolutely, H. We appreciate it. For those out there listening, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Share this content. And make sure you hit the like button on everything. I don't care if it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is. Just tell us that you like it and give us some feedback. But again, thanks, Ish. We really appreciate it. And we'll keep following your journey.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.